Today on Living History, we're speaking with Gu Wenda.
The other shock for me is my own cultural background. Because when you're in China, you don't feel you're Chinese. The New York has such an energy, has such a diverse, gave you such a shock. So when you jump into totally other culture, your Chineseness is all of a sudden become so obvious by all the comparison to the new surroundings.
Today, we're speaking with renowned artist Gu Wenda. Born in Shanghai in 1955, he studied at the Chinese Academy of Arts in the 1970s, a time when there were few foreign influences in China. But by the 1980s, that had begun to change, and in 1987, he had his first overseas exhibition in Canada, soon after moving to the United States to start his long journey as an independent artist. Gu Wenda has lectured all over the world, from the San Francisco Art Institute to the Art Institute of Chicago, to Harvard, to Yale, to the Oslo College of Arts, and many more. He's participated in numerous solo and group exhibitions, and his work has been widely discussed and reviewed. Today, we're very fortunate to hear more about his extraordinary journey. Gu Wenda, welcome.
Thanks.
So I was very intrigued because I had read that you had studied with Lu Yangchao at the Chinese Academy of Arts.
Yes.
And that was in the early 1980s, and there were no foreign artists, no foreign teachers, no students. Tell me a bit about that time. What was that like?
You know, I was lucky because I followed Lu Yanshao to study the traditional classic Chinese art. It's important for me to establish the base. And actually, it's not true because during my study, that period of time, China Academy of Arts already has had the foreign students. And one more good thing is that the Academy did was sold out a printing factory to import a lot of foreign books, painting books, art history books, and so allow us to study in the library. So that was a good beginning to have influence from the West, from the contemporary art world. So,
when you were getting to know the contemporary foreign art world through books, how did you imagine that? Like, because later you got to compare, right? Did you expect it to be different from what you later actually saw?
Yeah, of course, and it's kind of, you know, your imagination was kind of wild, and the environment about the beginning of the so-called 85 art movement. So I feel like a sponge, try to absorb as much as possible from all around the world. And of course, at that time, the information was limited. There was no computer. You know, the good thing is because I talk about it since 1949, the new China started, pretty much a door closed to the rest of the world. So China have had, you know, extraordinary translation team. So a lot of books, philosophical books and literature and poem, whatever, be published. This is a good source, even though they translate these books for the purpose of a criticism, you know, that time, you know.
But then, what was it like when you met the first foreigners? Did you guys talk about art? Did you get to exchange?
Yeah, of course. And, you know, I had actually two German, you know, foreign students in my academy, and they studied in Chinese calligraphy and ink painting. So we always exchange the ideas. I remember the first time my German student from Munich actually gave me a Klimt, the book of Klimt. So that was the nice gift. That time actually, China Academy has a lot of, you know, contacts with the rest of the world. So I think it's not a totally sealed as like a, you know, right before the open door policy. So it kind of rapidly developed, you know, kind of try to extend the sources to the rest of the world. So.
And in 1987, you went to Canada for your first overseas exhibition. Tell me a bit about what was it like to then yourself go abroad?
Actually, the thing is, I left Shanghai actually 87. The show happened in Canada actually the same year. Actually, it was the first avant-garde Chinese artists solo exhibition in the West. And at that time, I already moved to California, San Francisco. So actually, a week after I arrived in California, and I went to Toronto to receive a national award from Canadian government. Therefore, the solo show was followed in York University in Toronto.
Oh, I didn't know that you had gone to California before.
It's already 1 week before I went to Canada, actually.
This is a time when it was still very special and very rare, especially for artists.
Yeah, that was early.
Tell me, how did that come to be?
Actually, I was kind of lucky. Right before I was a teacher at National Academy, right? And I had a visitor from Utah University who was the dean of the medical school, who happened also was a Chinese painting collector. And he went to my academy to meet up me and to collect my works. So I had a financial support from my first American collector. That was a kind of, gave me such a financial freedom to move to, the States. China just opened to the rest of the world. And all of a sudden, so many foreigners from all directions, they brought up so much interest because China has been disconnected to the rest of the world for such like 20 years or 30 years. So actually, my generation was a kind of luck to meet the open door policy. Otherwise, you only can stay in China to, whatever your environment required, the government required. So I was lucky.
Tell me about flying to VS.
That was my first flight, actually. And I still have a good memory about it, when I left, the Hongqiao airport, and I looked down the Shanghai city. It was so dark. I was first landed in San Francisco. I looked down the land with so many lights. Obviously, by comparison, in that moment, China was still so poor. Today you have to go through all the security check, right? That moment, the airport was also very free. Because there's no security check. You talk about 87, right? So it was kind of very easy. For me, everything is new. It's a learning process. You landed in California, of course, everything is new. First of all, you have a problem of language, right? Then you have living conditions, the environment, the cultural side is all different. So, and I was every day, every minute was so excited, try to absorb as much as possible. So,
I read something that you wrote that I found very interesting. Misunderstandings create the new.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How was your English at that time?
Very, very basic, a few vocabulary. But that's why I spent 1 year in San Francisco only about learning language. I forget about anything else, just learning language. Then after 2 years, actually, the University of Minnesota invited me to be a faculty to teach drawings, ink paintings, calligraphy. So I had a chance to have to speak out the language. So I gradually exercised. That's why my English never be complete, because it's all learning from the daily actions. Not really, let's say if I immigrate to America about, younger than 10, so probably your English will be perfect. So for me, the language is not always not perfect, but somehow my friend told me your language make more sense because your vocabulary is limited. So you speak with less adjectives and adverbs, more meaningful, just directly focus on what you want to say. The other thing you talk about in my art creation, misunderstanding creates new. That's also about, it's all about a cultural exchange, right? You never precisely learn the other culture because you have your own culture base. Anything you import in your life is all goes through misunderstanding, misleading, all these kind of things. You have to figure out what you want. That's important.
I want to talk a bit more about misunderstandings because one of your series that really touched me was the 1983 Mythos of Lost Dynasty series. Because you spoke about the misspellings of the Dazibao posters here in China.
Yes.
And how the political pop and the real passion of the laboring masses moved you to create your earliest works and how it led you to think about China and what was happening in China. But the Chinese viewers of your artwork would understand immediately that the characters in your artwork were unclear, that they were miswritten. But when you would show it abroad, when you showed it to audiences who could not read Chinese characters, they would probably need a lot more explanation. And I wonder, what was that like? I hope you can tell me a little bit more, like if the reactions were different or similar.
You actually, my early works, as you mentioned about, the mythos of misunderstanding all these languages. It's as a language as a base of a culture or your daily life. But when you're painting, your artworks relate to language within your own cultural surroundings. So it will create much less misunderstanding or thought of things. But put it in international sense that create a lot of misunderstanding. But at the same time, people will use imagination, use their own culture base to try to catch up, to capture the meaning which they don't read it. So it creates another kind of meaning to the artwork. So I think, of course, the scholars, the professors, the translators try to do their job to try to lead the audience to the right direction. But the audience will always use their own imagination to realize that what they face. So,
do you watch people when they look at your art?
This is an important thing because the people's reaction, it creates a lot of things to the artists. Let's say a singer, if you face in a theater, you face no audience, you feel kind of bad. So for others too, if the audience in front of your work, they have kind of reaction, really, attached to what they see, that it's happiness to the artist. It's so important.
Tell me about some of those reactions that you remember, because many people would see Chinese art, contemporary Chinese art, for the first time. What kind of reactions do you remember getting?
As you know, my artworks actually kind of challenge and controversial in different ways. This is always I focus on. I want you to extend people's thinking and thoughts by, challenge, stimulating the controversy issues. So this is a part of my work nature, actually. I have two works from the United Nations series. One is a Sweden and Russian monument in Stockholm. And I faced the opening with 4 police cars to arrest a Russian artist. Because a Russian avant-garde was involved with the show. And he actually, in the opening, acted as a rock and roll star, tried to pull down all my works and escaped from the opening. So the other Russian artist was played as a naked dog to attack the audience. Therefore, the policemen, finally they arrested, the Russian artist. This is it's a surprising, it's kind of violent opening. So this is one of the things I remember from the, audience, the opening situation. And the other things I can mention to you, I had my first solo show in Xi'an in 1986. Because of my, the ink painting series shot in Xi'an was too radical, too controversial. Even the language is all miswriting and misunderstood by the general audience. So the show closed by the government before the opening. That was 86. And there's another show I try to mention to you was in Israel. My United Nations went to Israel. The United Nations try to unite people's genes, DNA. So I used the hair to build up, use the local hair to build up the monuments for the local culture, local civilizations. And I went to Israel. I have to use Jewish hair. That was a controversial side. It's very sensitive to Jews because of Holocaust, right? So that had a very controversial discussion between artist and government and the curator, whether the show should be realized or not, because it touched a very sensitive side of the Jewish. To the end, the proposal went to the parliament. And the curator had a radio live interview with the chair of the parliament, whether the work should be realized. And to the end, I completely realized the work. When I went back to Tel Aviv airport, the workers there, they asked me if I needed more Jewish hair, we donate. So that time I felt the power of art, because the radio station and the TV station followed my creation in the desert for a week. So it publicized to the general audience, general publicity. So a lot of people knows this project. Did it very well.
And also speaks about how art can build bridges between different societies, different civilizations.
Yes. So this is and also a kind of learning process. Each controversy, each challenge actually gave me kind of a reward, gave me kind of rethinking about my artwork. So therefore, my future work has more thoughtful, and they become more and more think about the public reaction and general situation in different regions.
Then I'm going to jump into a question about that, because I feel like I did see a change in your artwork maybe around 1999. It seems like a new phase when you were starting to use human hair, the intricate glass boxes, then you started using green tea leaves, and by this time you had probably spent around a decade abroad. So I wonder if a novelty now was replaced by something else, something quieter. I'd like to know what was going on for you at this time. You started mentioning quietness, meditation, humbleness. To me, that's a stark contrast of the big artworks of the Dazibao posters before. So was this a new phase of your international life?
Yes. You talk about it, I mentioned about the United Nations project, and this last year was the 30 years anniversary of the project. It's ongoing, in different parts of the world. And I have a total 6 million people's hair in my artwork. accumulated through 30 years. So let's say without moving to America, to New York, I would never had idea try to do this kind of project. Now, first of all, a lot of people talk about it, the genetic research is the future, kind of science, future society. And even Bill Gates talk about it, the future richest man should come from, genetic medicine, that kind of fields. So my work, after a few years in America, I started to think about the use of the, biotechnology and the human genes to involve with my art creation. That's why the United Nations started, and New York is kind of, diverse in races and in cultures. That gave me such a great influence. And talk about artworks, great artworks. I think the greatest is not the artwork, is the timing, the era, and the location. These things actually gave you the power of the creation and the base of the, your artworks. So I always look down myself as an artist, but I always think about timing and location is the most important. If your artwork presents the timing and the location, then your work will be recorded as important artworks. So the time I decided to move to New York is also, I thought about New York is the center of the contemporary world. So therefore, I made this decision. I think today I thought about it's so right.
And you moved to New York in the 1980s when New York was rough.
Yes,
and
yes.
Basquiat and Warhol were there. And you were one of the earliest Chinese artists who moved over there to make it. Zhang Huan also moved there. I think also Ai WeiWei was there.
Yeah. I think that, Ai WeiWei is a few years earlier than me. And I was kind of early, but not the earliest among the earliest. And the good thing for me is, the time I was in New York, the first time in New York, actually, America actually started a kind of new world order, right? And kind of forming in a new internationalism. This is, I right into the right time and right location. The last 30 years are the greatest thing for me, and I write on, actually are two countries. America become a world superpower, and China left kind of poor and closed world. So China become a kind of secondary large economy in the world. These two parallel countries actually is my driving force. These two countries, I brought my art, into a world, focus. That was lucky.
Yeah. In 1987, if you went abroad, you were gone. It was very difficult for people here to make an international phone call. The internet didn't come about until, 94, 95.
Yeah, I had a first computer, Apple computer, was it 96 or 95?
How did you talk to your parents back here, for instance?
A few contacts. Usually you do, that time still had writing letters, and through the mails, the traditional mails. And I don't even know how can I come this way. It's difficult, really difficult. You talk about it. If it's still important for the Chinese to go abroad to study, you look at it today. They all supported the parents, right? Even though parents, if a family has a good situation, buy apartments, buy a house for their kids, where they study, But the time I left China with no support, no penny support from my parents. It's all by myself. It's very difficult. Cannot imagine. If today, I probably won't leave, you know. So that was a young boy. So I have kind of challenging myself, and I have a kind of simple-minded want to go. So.
At this point, we would like to take a moment to tell you about our project. The period between China's opening in 1979 under Deng Xiaoping and the 2010 Shanghai Expo deserves to be remembered. We want to collect the memories that Chinese, Americans, and other foreigners made together during these times. We hope you will subscribe to our channel to see many more interviews like this one in the coming weeks. If you too have a story that you think needs to be remembered, we would very much like to hear from you. And we would like to thank the U.S. Consulate in Shanghai for their generous support. Without their sponsorship, we would not have been able to start this channel.
I think we need to take a moment and talk about what it was like to have grown up in China and then moved to New York City. It must have been absolutely shocking.
Yes. And also, of course, you have world museums around you in New York. So everything's new. As I mentioned, that I'm as a sponge. And also, the other shock for me is my own cultural background. Because when you're in China, you don't feel you're Chinese or your language or your art, because everything you're eating, you're sleeping, it's all Chinese. So when you jump into totally other culture, your Chineseness is all of a sudden become so obvious by all the comparison to the new surroundings, right? So this is a kind of thing, it goes both sides. The New York has such an energy, has such a diverse, gave you such a shock. At the same time, your Chinese background gave you a shock too, because you started gradually learning Chinese. So it goes both sides. It's the same as I remembered when I was in the 85 movement, when Western influence all of a sudden come in after open door policy. Then actually at the same time, you also want to challenge the contemporary art as well. It goes both sides, always both sides.
Do you introduce yourself differently when you're in China, or do people think of you differently compared to when you're in America?
Of course. You know, this is all, it's all about your identity issue. It's also about exoticism, you know, because of based on the difference, and people think about you differently, even though you are the same person. You know what I mean? Throughout a period to the period, you may change, but you're still a person. I think it's like a Chinese old popular saying: when people move, it means to live. A tree to move it means to die. So when you move around, you're always excited. Energy always generated into the certain level, a new level. You know, after certain periods, you also can be tired of the kind of challenge, you know, the differences, and it become, in certain ways, it become crisis. That's why people talk about it. You know, in certain years after into the new internationalism American established, and people start to think about a cultural identity crisis. So, and today, people may be into more depths of the internationalism and want to keep their cultural roots instead of, you know, changing myself into, you dump yourself into the new surroundings. So
that's very interesting. So right now, the time is very different from when you first moved abroad.
Yeah, of course.
China's changed a lot, and America has changed a lot. And do you still see big value for students or young artists or other people to move between China, America, or other places?
Sure. It's always good, you know, you learn from the others. the international relation between China and the rest of the world, especially for European countries, America, has certain, problems. It's not as smooth, as beautiful as the time I moved to New York. That was I call it honeymoon relation. So that time was the best time I can remember as an artist. And also, I think, to be honest, less the power than economists and all these politicians. But for artists, the best I can do is try to bring world together, to bring the peace to the world. The United Nations project has this kind of central concept, try to bring all people together. That's what I want to do. Even though, certain relations, certain situations aren't friendly, but you still need to go abroad to absorb as much as possible. And it's as well as the foreign student come to China is also important. Like you're in China for certain years. So anyway.
You previously had written that a culture cannot be translated if we believe that it has to be precisely translated to be
Sure.
Misunderstandings Create new. The story of your life?
You think about it, one single artist, maybe you have 30 years, the best 30 years can create great works, right? But 30 years, no more than that. But I spent one project for 14 years. The Beilin, the Forest of Stone Stelaes. I spent 14 years in Xi'an. I built a big studio, and I had a wonderful, unbelievable crafts, handcrafted all the text on the stone stelaes. And the stone stelaes actually very interesting, the text on it. And I choose the most popular town poems. I look at it into American Eastern studies, the standard town poem translation. I retranslated it back to Chinese by English, mimic English sound. So it become a new contemporary poem. So this kind of, through the languages, then the misunderstanding of the translation create something new. That's important. So for me, in many ways, there's no negative thing. If you're smart enough, negativity, it can be a creativity. So always like this, you have to have your open mind. You have to have positive attitudes towards something difficult, something problematic. You try to get things. You not try to go around the problems. You try to solve problem by something new. You can give to the world.
I think everybody who lives in a foreign country comes at some point across people saying you cannot possibly understand this feeling or context because you were not born here, because you are not from here.
So you can say, I can get certain things that you don't get it. It's important, This is you speaking yourself, So when you face a new surroundings, a new environment, your sense, it becomes so fresh, so active. So you stay a place, you don't move, you feel comfortable, but you don't get new. You don't have a challenge. You're repeating yourself day by day and year by year. To the end, you gradually disappear. Your sense is disappearing. So I'm 69. I still want to traveling. I still want to face challenge. I feel like my seventh sense is open, active. It's important. Don't stop, move.
I really wanted to ask you about the neon calligraphies from 2004. And I had read your thoughts about identity crisis and your attempts to redefine yourself in America, but I'd really like to know more about what was going on in your mind that led you to this in particular. What was your motivation?
Oh, this is an interesting question because you mentioned it early on to me when you return back to Shanghai, what kind of shock you have, So this is a series I did reflecting my shock when I returned to Shanghai. Because as I told you, my first flight left Shanghai. I looked down, the land was so dark, right? Then you after 10 years or 20 years, you returned. You find out Shanghai become cosmopolitan again. It's like in the 20s, 30s, Shanghai was by far is the most diverse and energy in the Far East. So I think that the neon works presents the city of Shanghai, even though now they don't use all these traditional classic neon tubes. They use LED lights or whatever, screen. But I think that this kind of reflecting the old Shanghai and the early development of Shanghai city, it become flourish, become energetic, become world city again. So this is a neon work about. And you look at the content of my neon work, it reflects the world famous name brands, right? Sotheby's, Ferragamo, all these things. It's kind of actually reflecting my thoughts when I returned to Shanghai. A lot of artists, they just sealed themselves in the studio, do portraits, do painting, whatever their mind is. I travel a lot and involved with different people, different societies. So I cannot ignore my social context, the scene of different world. I have to all put my reaction into my work, so it can become more and more cultural, more sociable, more social, and sometimes in a touch politics as well. So I think that my work is kind of issue-oriented rather than just a pure art. And this is also what I learned from New York City, from the new internationalism. It's always related to the cultural identity and cultural identity crisis. All these things is all related. That's why I call my work as issue-oriented instead of pure art. In America, it's the same. Before 80s, you have formalism, you have American, like a minimalism, and you have art for art kind of movement. After 80s, it gradually changed. And my life moved to New York, it changed a big, significant ways. If I still in Hangzhou doing ink paintings, probably I would be more sealed, just focus on the literal or Chinese traditional painting,
So curiosity about other cultures, about life, about discoveries. It sounds like that really shaped how your art evolved.
Curiosity is a part of your personality. Curiosity is very important. It brings you to the certain depths, and of course, curiosity also makes you very tiring. It's not that easy, So anyway, it depends on your goal of your life, your personality. I always try to make a balance. So I always believe, that the Confucianism, central concept of Confucianism is a kind of, a balancing act towards my two extremes. I talk about early education. I had a, 社会主义教育. I had a Marxist education early on, but I moved to New York is the most capitalist city. So these two extremes, these two extremes are very far apart. But I look at my structure of my mind, right? So in the middle is the Confucianism. So it try to balancing my early life and my later life. So it's totally black-white. But after you're balancing your two extremes in your personality or your early experience or later experience and they become one. It doesn't matter you eat Chinese food, you eat 3 times a day, right? In New York, you eat 3 meals a day, also 3 meals a day. They're always similar, same things in human life. So no matter how different world I had experienced in the past 30, 40 years, but one thing we share is the humanity as human. This is the thing, it doesn't matter you're from Africa. I went to Johannesburg, and it doesn't matter you went to Russia or you went to America. To the end, we're all human beings. That's why I spent 30 years to do the United Nations project.